So a brief look at my channel will reveal a video that was made about the original Hammond organ. The one I tested and presented was the Hammond D100 from 1965, and hooked up to that was a Leslie cabinet, a 147 model. Sound great together. It's kind of the holy grail, you know, it's a piece of rock history. Now, the Hammond organ, when it came out in 1934 and 1935, its design brief was to synthesize a church organ and to be relatively lightweight and portable, according to Mr. Hammond. Now, it's important to point out here that the church organ is a synthesizer. When you look at one in a church, it's got trumpet, flute, clarinet, or reed sounds. You know, it's basically synthesizing instruments of the orchestra, and it's kind of your one-man band instrument. Great, works perfectly. The Hammond was a synthesizer of that, where you could model your own sound using the drawbars. So the Hammond was synthesizing a synthesizer. And these 5 Hammond clones that I've got here that I'm going to show you are synthesizing that synthesizer, which is synthesizing a synthesizer. So it's important not to get too bogged down into what sounds right and what doesn't, because actually all these Hammond sounds are very good, and I'm going to go through each of these now. Now, one of the reasons I'm showing you these 2 physical ones is that these can be had second hand for reasonably good money. There's a VK-7, this Roland, on eBay at the moment for 150 quid. I mean, it might have gone by now, but it needs a new display, so it just needs a bit of tinkering. But the sound of this is absolutely fantastic, and I'm going to show you that now. So I've got the first 3 drawbars open. Just close those on all of my sounds here, so that they're reasonably the same to start off with for basis of comparison. And I'm going to show you the Leslie fast and slow and the vibrato and all that sort of thing. So here is the VK-7. Very nice. Above that here, now just staying with the VK a minute, the drawbars here, these bars are very similar to the original Hammond. So when this was designed, it was a real boon. It's suddenly Hammond players had MIDI and you could store your own sounds, and it was all very lovely. And the sound can be controlled via these bars. In real time, they feel very similar to sort of natural drawbars, if you will. Now, moving to the Nord Electro Rack now. This is the second one. The sounds are extremely good. I do have to check with the volume control to make sure I'm listening to a different one. Very nice. Now the drawbars on this are slightly different. They're electronic. So you draw buttons down to open them and buttons to close them. This did rattle the cage of 1 or 2 Hammond players when it came out in 2003-4 or so. I've had this one for 14 years. I bought it because I was going on tour and I needed something. Went to Japan a lot, and I needed something I could just literally stick in a suitcase, and it had all my sounds on it, and I could just hook it up to any keyboard that was provided. So there it is. You've got the same percussion sounds. This one's got an overdrive in it, so that you can sort of dirty it up a bit and it just sounds a bit manky. Now, we've also got the ability to disconnect the Leslie speaker, leaving the sort of 1960s sort of spinet Hammond organ that just had internal speakers instead. So instead of this, you get this. So notice the click sound. Now, that is a synthesized sort of imperfection of the original Hammond, and at the moment it's on its maximum setting. But there, it's been removed completely, and I can reinstate my Leslie speaker for that. so it's a clean sounding thing. You can also do that with the Roland. There's all sorts of settings that you can, and you can store all your presets and that. You can make all this sound as if it's really tired, you know, old Hammond organ. So, moving on, we've got GarageBand on iOS. Now, the reason I brought this one as well, obviously this is, well, it's £0 and 0 pence for the GarageBand software. But, of course, the piece of hardware is a couple £100 or whatever an iPad is. But we've got that same capability on a mobile phone. Now, listen to this. Now, I trust you'll agree that's not bad. In fact, it's very good. It's really good. It's giving these two a run for their money in practical terms. And when you're recording on GarageBand, you've got the whole thing at your fingertips. You can hook up a keyboard to this using the camera kit or the USB to Lightning kit. And you can play the sounds on a physical keyboard. But the drawbars are touchscreen only. So, but you know, there's a few restrictions on this. It's slightly fewer controls, but how many do you need? That sounds pretty good to me. So, moving on, we've got the software synths. There are two that I've got on my laptop here. I've got the EVB3 that comes with Logic, and I've also got the B4, which is the Native Instruments version. So, now, I trust you'll agree that is a really, really nice Hammond clone. And the other one? Of course, I'm varying the drawbar settings on the computer there, but you can program things like the drawbars on this to control those. And indeed on the other one, I've obviously hit a setting which has disabled these for some reason. But that's not really the point. It does work with this absolutely fine. But you are listening to two very good software synths as well. So which one do you choose? Well, it depends. If you're recording, go for a software synth where you can, and then you can have things like the standard 9 sliders that you get on a modern keyboard. I've got one of those over here. You can have the Novation launch key, this thing here, where you can vary the sliders here and program those up in Logic to actually give you full control over your software synth. So there it is. There are the Hammond sounds. Really, it's hard to choose. It's really tricky to choose between them. They all sound very, very good. And but obviously when you get your hands on an original Hammond with the speaker system next to you, that's a different ball game. But frankly, you know, when a Hammond weighs whatever it does, lots, and you have a studio like mine, very small, things like this are an absolute boon.